Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Disha Rastogi, an enterprise architect for MarTech/CDP platforms. So today's video is the second video in the series of videos covering CDP best practices and how to handle the typical use cases on CDP. This video will focus on the development phase. What are the phases? How to go about these phases? What are the do's and don'ts, the best practices? And so do watch the video till the end, or you may miss out on something important. These videos are basically to educate you guys on the nuances of the different phases, different steps that are involved, the best practices that you should think about while developing and implementing customer data platforms for different clients. So, this series, anyone into customer data platform, it's really important. And do subscribe, guys. Do like and share videos, which will help me know if the content is helpful to you. And let's get started with this. So we are going to talk about the first phase of the development, which is ingestion pipelines. Now, I am going to give you a very general outline, right? The specifics would vary from CDP to CDP. It will vary from source to source, right? The details, the nuances will vary from integration to integration, and we cannot comment on that, right? But what I am going to talk about the general do's and don'ts, the general best practices and limitations that you need to look out for, right? So starting with the first one is scope, right? What's the purpose? What is exactly you are trying to bring into the CDP? You are trying to bring what kind of data, right? What type of data, right? So for example, you have 20 years of data in the database, but for the CDP, only 10 years is relevant. So you would bring only 10 years, last 10 years of data. So those are the conditions that you need to incorporate into your ingestion pipeline, right? Then second is that you have to follow whatever is there in that low level design for that particular source, right? Whatever the architect has put in the ERD diagram for that source, you need to follow that while developing your ingestion pipeline, right? Then is transformation logic. Transformation logic would be one of the most important things in your pipeline. For example, you have emails, right? You will transform emails to lowercase and bring it into your system, right? Bring it into the CDP. So, one caveat or best practice, whatever you want to take it for, is try to understand the power, the features of the customer data platform that you're working on and how does it integrate with the destinations. For example, you bring emails. Now, Facebook needs lowercase emails, right? Does Are you transforming it at the source level or you are transforming it when you've brought it into the CDP, right? It should not be that when you actually start doing activation, you realize that you need lowercase emails. Your emails are in an inconsistent format, some uppercase, some lowercase, and then you decide, okay, now what I have to do, I have to re-ingest the entire data. Because even if you are doing the pre-processing inside the CDP, even then you would, you have already ingested data into the CDP. So you cannot do that transformation logic then, right? It has to be done when you are doing your first load of data. So those are the kind of things, right? When before doing your historical load of the data into in the CDP, you need to make sure that such kind of nuances are taken care of. You have all the identifiers that you need to activate to different marketing platforms in the relevant format, right? In the and yeah, the customer data platform has features to support the different transformations or encryptions like SHA-256 on its own, and that also you enable when you do the ingestion, right? For example, you need E164 format for phone numbers. So when you are doing historical load of data, you need to have that E164 format field also there in your schema, getting and the data getting ingested into that field, right? Now you are bringing that field, or the platform is providing the E164 field, that will vary. But my point is that before doing the historical load, make sure that you have all the identifiers that you need for these various marketing platforms ingested into your CDP in the right format, and all those discussions are aligned that this is how you will get E164 format field, this is how you will get SHA256 field, and any other field that you need, right? For example, country code. Now, country code you need in, two-letter format. That is another example. So, I mean, there are various examples that you need, like first name, last name, you need, right? Everything lowercase. So, there are lots of things that when you start activating to marketing platforms, you need the fields in a specific format, and that is when you realize, okay, I have to do another historical load to correct the inconsistent format, or to bring another field, right? So I'm giving you those kind of examples, real life examples that happen, right? So that's why I talked about transformation logic. Then your joining conditions, right? They are also very crucial. When you're bringing data from multiple tables, joining them and then bringing data into the CDP, then your joining condition becomes very crucial, right? If it is just coming from one table and you do not, it's a pretty straightforward select star type of query, then it's simple, right? Then the next thing is that your scheduler, right? You have to see how your pipeline will be triggered on a daily basis. You may have a control M job or a cloud function, whatever it is. So you have to see how that flow happens every day, right? Then another key thing people miss is the data quality. My advice would be that do all your analysis, all your like how you would create the transformation logic and everything else on production data, and you check for any data issues, right? You, for example, you said there is one to many relationship between two fields A and B, and that is how your entire ERD, your entire low level design, everything is designed based on that. But in production, there are some outliers. How do you deal with those outliers? So those are the things that you need to look out for, right? You have to run your pipeline logic on the production data to understand what kind of challenges you will face, like inconsistent data column, nulls in one of the column, and so on. This will help you avoid any production surprises. It will help you solve for those challenges that you would face in the future, right? So this is like, I've talked about the various challenges you will face when we talk about ingestion pipelines. The next one is CDP configuration. So one is you know, how you are going to bring in data into the CDP. That is one piece that you have to work on the development phase. The second phase is how do you configure your customer data platform. So the first thing before I start that is that make sure the data model that you have designed will meet all your use case requirements, right? Whatever is the segment requirement, activation requirement, personalization requirement, just look at those requirements, do that entire analysis, be sure that your data model that you have designed will meet these requirements. Otherwise, it will break your CDP, right? Then, based on this data model, you're going to create relevant sources. I mean, the specifics will vary from CDP to CDP. Idea remains the same. You should follow best practices like consistent naming convention. Do not re-ingest the same data under two fields. For example, I have one field A and second field B, both have the same data. Why do I need two fields for the same data? I mean, that's the kind of discussion that you need to have. That's the kind of best practices that you need to maintain. Have a very clean and consistent structure, right? develop frameworks for data governance and consent. You should also think about data lifecycle. Now, for example, you have some data that loses value, right? It loses value, say, in every month, right? So, for example, the last 6 months of data is not relevant anymore. So, and it's huge data, say it's a 1 billion kind of data. So, this 1 billion of data you should remove from your system. Why? Because it has no value, right? So this is the kind of data lifecycle practices that you need to think about. You need to discuss with your product vendor on how you can implement them, right? But I would always recommend that you look at the data lifecycle practices. If the data is no more usable, you should look for ways to delete the data from the customer data platform. Now, one very important point that I would like to focus here when we are talking about the development phase is that you're dealing with big data, right? While you are doing ingestion pipelines, while you are doing CDP configuration, you should look for big data challenges, right? What are the challenges you will face when you are dealing with big data? Query processing cost, data size cost, and so on and forth. And you should look to optimize that. You should look to resolve such kind of challenges, right? And that is one of the most important point that you should be focusing on while you are in the development phase. So now we will talk about the testing phase, right? So when we talk about the testing phase, right, the idea here is to test your pipelines, your CDP configuration, data model end to end. Now, one of the key limitations that you will witness here is that you will be testing based on dev data, right, which will not be similar to your production data. And hence, a couple of use cases cannot be tested here. And as I said before, do your analysis on production data and based on that, create your data model and pipeline logic. So that's why I said that, right? Another key thing is to document all your evidences of testing. This will help in client driven testing, which is your UAT phase. And one caveat here is log all your defects, right? Log all your defects and track them as they get resolved. So this will help you in the SIT testing, these best practices, right? Now moving on to the production deployment. Production deployment, when I talk of, you have to make sure all configuration, all pipelines, they have been tested thoroughly before you deploy to production. SIT testing has been done with full sincerity. Ensure scheduling is set properly, all code scripts, all CDP configuration is done properly, everything is set for you to deploy to production. Again, production deployment entails rigorous testing because when you deploy the pipelines first time, you have to take care of a lot of things. You have to ensure that everything is right first time. Then, when you are doing incremental stuff, first time incremental you have to check, second time obviously everything would be fine, right? You have to do some sanity on a regular basis, but that we will talk about later in the operational, when we cover the operational phase. But the idea here is that the first time when you are deploying, you have to do rigorous testing. Now, when you do production deployment, you can create your destination connections and test them, right? You can create segments and activate them to the relevant destination, check for match rates, check how ID resolution is working, and no unnecessary profiles are getting created, right? You can see here that a lot of validation you are going to do in production, and you are going to ensure that CDP is able to fulfill all the relevant use cases before you start asking the marketing teams to use CDP for activation, personalization use cases. Now, as you can see that I didn't say that you do in SIT testing, create segments, do validation for ID resolution, do validation for match rates. You can do that in the testing phase, but it may or may not be relevant, right? Because it depends on the quality of data that you have in your test environments. The It matters when you do it in production. That is when you get the true picture. right? And another key thing that you need to ensure is what is your data deletion policy that is going to be implemented in the CDP, right? What is your data deletion policy followed by your organization for compliance measures, and how do you implement it in the CDP? So that is one important piece that you have to take care in the production environment. And last but not the least, you also have to develop a framework for managing users when we are talking about the production sandbox, roles, access rights, and so on. Yeah. So hope this video has been helpful. Do like, share, and subscribe, and watch out for the next video in the series. Thank you.